Hi, guys. I wanted to provide this very brief overview. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. I think we're diving too much into the weeds to try too hard to understand and not motivate on terms of the key concepts. So let's go through the process of what's happening. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about Moneyball over and over and over again. We're not going to talk about the hero's journey in Star Wars and any of the other stuff. We're going to model around Moneyball, one movie, so that we have one area to provide focus. If you think about Moneyball, look at all the things that are going on. What's the world? How much time did Moneyball spend to talk about baseball, the fact that the Oakland A's lost key players, to talk about the economics? They introduced one of the heroes is or one of the guides, I guess, is Jonah Hill's character is really more an introduction of economics. We have our main hero is Brad Pitt, but you could also look at other heroes too in terms of themes. You've got the setting of where they are today. We have the value story here, which is basically that Moneyball changed the game. We talked through the plot, the sequence of events that that happened, and they went through and did some foreshadowing to talk about Billy Beane as an individual player. I'm going to skip formula because that's what I want us to challenge ourselves on. I don't think we're doing a good enough job of articulating it, and I want to talk about that. What are some of the key themes? The key themes are how hard it is to change, really. It's not an issue of a thesis of why the economics work. They referred to that with Bill James in his book, about the economics of it. But really, this is about how do you take a new idea that's totally disruptive and implement it, and look at all the change that happened in terms of the fans, in terms of the manager, in terms of the players, in terms of how he's treated by everybody else. Who's the cast? Who are all the people involved? How much effort did Billy need to put into getting the players to buy in the agreement network? Some of the coaches, getting some of the people on, the difficulty he had with the scouts and how he had to do that. What would you say is the villain of the story? I'm going to skip that. I'm going to ask you to think about it. Who is our hero? And actually, maybe we look at this as there are many heroes. Isn't Hattiesburg a hero in his own mark? Isn't some of the other players heroes? Aren't there lots of heroes here? Because frankly, it's a team win. Our main hero, of course, is Brad Pitt, but look at all the other heroes along the way. What were the pitfalls? What trials did he have to overcome? What is the storyboard? We saw the manifestation of it. And then who is the guide? Who is the person that enters Billy's life to start changing it? So what I'm going to do is highlight a few scenes. What I want us to do is, what's wrong with baseball? We need to ask ourselves, what's wrong with selling, or what's wrong with OmniTracks, or what are we doing here? And this is exactly the quote. I took this out. I took the time to write it out. We're going to play just this scene a little bit, just so you hear the dramatic implication of it, but just reading it. There is an epidemic failure within the game to understand what is really happening. Do you not think that there's an epidemic failure of what within technology companies or any business to understand what's happening in the trenches with sales? This leads people who run Major League Baseball teams to misjudge their players and mismanage their teams. Do you think that companies are misjudging their individual workers? Are they mismanaging their companies? I think so. The data definitely says so. If you look at the data around productivity levels, people run ball clubs think in terms of buying players. People who run companies think in terms of buying, of investing in activity. Your goal shouldn't be to buy players. Your goal shouldn't be to drive activity. Your goal should be to buy wins. Your goal should be to buy contracts. In order to buy wins, in order to buy contracts, you need to buy runs. You need to buy the advancement of sales objectives. Baseball thinking is medieval. Sales and marketing thinking is medieval. They are asking all the wrong questions. They are asking all the wrong questions. And if I say it to anyone, I am ostracized. I'm a leper. If I say it to anyone, I'm ostracized. I'm a leper. All of us have experienced that in our own. I think it opens up all kinds of interesting possibilities. So we went into changes. That's our driving force, is what is a possibility. That's what design thinking is really best at.
Who are you?
So here's another scene. What energy must we overcome? How do we circle the wagons to allow innovation inside Omnitrax, inside any company? Here's the scene at the end. After Billy Bean had the courage, keyword is courage, to stick with his guns and follow the model all the way through. Here's the quote. I know you're taking it in the teeth out there, but the first guy through the wall, he always gets bloody. Always. Isn't that true? Aren't we seeing the same frustrations that we run into about sales and marketing? This is threatening, not just a way of doing business, but in their minds, it's threatening the game. But in reality, it's threatening their livelihoods. Aren't we running into that ourselves by bringing our own biases and unconscious competent biases to the table? It's threatening their jobs. It's threatening the way they do things. Think about all of the friction that we're running into in order to do what needs to be done to overcome the medieval thinking. Think about all the changes that need to occur. How does that impact from adopt? How does that impact from roles? How does that impact from connect messaging? How does that impact in terms of how we package our capabilities? How do we catalyze that? And every time this happens, whether this is a government or a way of doing business or whatever it is, the people who are holding the reins have their hands on the switch. They go batshit crazy. Aren't we experiencing that? Here's the issue, right? The issue is that nobody is responsible for solving the Ben's problem that we're encountering with our clients. Nobody. And because nobody's responsible, each individual contributor believes they are responsible. So the number of people who believe they're holding the reins is massive. The reality is that they do not. And that's why we experience so much batshit crazy. We're experiencing batshit crazy in our own team and in microcosm because each of us are channeling our own constituents. And then at the end of the scene, I mean, anybody that is not tearing their team right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs. So that's what we want people to think, is that the model that we've got, if anybody's not following it, they're dinosaurs. And we need to have that swagger.
Steve told.
So what are we not doing? There's a scene in here in Moneyball where this guy, who's a fat player, never extends singles and does it. He chooses to drown first base and go to second base, and he falls down and he gets embarrassed, right? We're not communicating we are hitting home runs and we don't even know it, and we're not communicating it. We need to organize those we need to first communicate what our home runs are. Help those of us who are, all of us are being Jeremys. We're hitting these home runs without unconscious competence, and we feel horrible that we took the effort to actually round first base and go to second. And we have that awful feeling of falling down in front of a bunch of people and looking stupid. But the reality is, who's laughing? No one was laughing at him. They were laughing because the guy hit a home run and they were happy for him. And we can all relate to that very human element. So why do we need discipline? Why we need discipline is because all of us are going to assume we know what the problem is, but we don't. In this exchange, Billy talks about it's an unfair game. He asks people to think differently. In order to execute the game plan, they need to think differently. Of course, the scouts push back on that. It's standard operating procedure. Let's do the way. You got to have faith in us being anybody with a functional role. You got to have faith in us that we're going to go and address it. We're going to go address this problem for you, Ray. We have to have faith in us that we're going to take your one Omnitrax vision. In this scene, we've got to equip people like Ray, and we've got to equip ourselves to be able to have this conversation. Is there another player out there like Giambi? And then get people to react. No. If there was, could we afford him? No. Then what the fuck are you talking about, man? We've got to be able to call out where the unconscious bias is. We have to be able to concentrate and make it that concise. We are information overloading, and I'm as much of a culprit as anybody else because we're so focused on understanding all this stuff around us. And I like this key thing. If we play like the Yankees in here, we'll lose to them out there. At Omnitrax, if we play like we've been, we're going to lose. If we play like we have been in here, we're going to lose out there when we go to try to do Omnitrax one. For us in growth enablement, if we play like we've done in our past jobs, we're going to lose out there. We've got to recognize that we've got to help every one of our customers realize that if they want to play like they have been playing before, they're likely to lose. And we have to create the discipline to be able to focus and be curious about what the real problem is, rather than people just jumping into solving it. So how does this relate? Oh, dang it. I launched this by accident. I'm sorry. How does this relate? So the Moneyball scene, so this scene right here, Jonah Hill talking about it's medieval. Omnitrax is medieval. It's set up to sell products. So this is by the way, this is the implication of Omnitrax, and I'm summarizing it to be simple about it. Omnitrax is medieval. It's set up to sell products. So throughout the whole storyboard, we're gonna have to do this. All companies who are competing in the digital economy are medieval. I guess you could, yes, there are some exceptions, but I'm just making this simple, okay? We can wordsmith the reality and say, well, Google isn't and Amazon isn't, fine, okay? I can amend this to be more specific. Let's relax on that. This isn't publicly facing. The second part then would be Omnitrax isn't looking at problems the right way. And the scouts are the RTV team. They're resisting the strategy. We have to help them overcome it. The way that we're going to help them overcome it is through exercises and templates and structure so that they can discover themselves. We are not in the business of giving them answers. We will give them answers along the way, but we have to be careful about not giving them an answer too early so that the host, that's Omnitrax, doesn't reject the transplant, which is our route to value deliverables. Different people within Omnitrax see it differently. If we don't manage that process, they're going to resist it. All companies, so that's Omnitrax, for all companies who are organized in silos are going to run into this resistance. So we have to be very disciplined about what our approach is and why we're following design thinking. Design thinking is about being curious and being disciplined to be curious. It is not just some different technique. It is fundamentally changing how we problem solve, which is let's get clear on what the problem is first and make sure we understand the implications of it. Let's build prototypes. Let's test those prototypes. Let's put them into the field and field test it first before rolling it out. All of that stuff are things that we don't do. We want to make a deliverable and be done with it. It doesn't work that way now. And then the last scene, Omnitrax will be set up to be successful when we give them the go-to-customer or whatever working title we want to call it, whatever the model is, routes to value, whatever we will call it. Companies, we want to make that implication. Companies who are not the A's or not Omnitrax, who are not following our go-to-customer growth model or whatever we label it is, are dinosaurs. What this means to us as a team. Think about this, think about the video. Let's play this video over and over and over again. It's only 2 minutes. But one, we are all doing things we never do. Trying to extend a signal into a double. In our heads, it's going to feel embarrassing going forward, or we're going to fall down, or we're going to resist getting feedback from everybody else. But that's what we need to do. That's the practice of what we need to do so we hit home runs. The other thing is we're not realizing when we hit a home run and we're not communicating it. We don't take the victory lap. We don't say the high five. We don't claim victory. And that's going to kill us. It's going to kill us if we don't get more focused on that. Too much curiosity and understanding and not enough claiming victory. Then the other thing that it means is we have to recognize we're following a process. One, we're better together than as individuals. No one of us is going to be a hero. Don't be a hero getting thrown out at second if you listen to this quote. We need to understand that we need to understand what our team goals are. too much focus is on what I need to do individually. And that's a habit we need to break. And we need to understand what is the overall philosophy of the team. And then make sure you understand your role. So I love this. I love the scene where the guy says, so do I bunt? There's no bunts whatsoever. But then the guy gets this, so steal, do I steal second? No. Well, that's what I do. No, I don't pay you to get on first. I pay you to get on first, not to get thrown out at second. So that key point then is, what are we paid for? What is our value? And we need to be really conscious of it. Julie, your value is to help us create tools to help drive adoption. We need to move into tools and less into discussion. Brian, your job is to help us understand roles and the roles that companies are going to run into in context of all this. How are we going to help redefine the roles of the scouts? And then also help people see that. Walter, your role is to help identify what is the connected messaging that runs through it. Study Moneyball. Look at how many themes is being communicated to many, many, many different audiences and what the meaning is. Dave, your job is package. Package means how do we help simplify the organization of all of the different capabilities? How do we lighten that up? And then how do we do it in such a way that we're enabling sellers to be successful? So those are some things. Now let me just show you some of the scenes there so we can relate to them. Oops, I don't know why I did that.
What? Who are you? I don't answer. What happened? Why? Understand what is there is.
All right, watch this scene right here.
Is an epidemic failure within the game to understand what is really happening. And this leads people who run Major League Baseball teams to misjudge their players and mismanage their teams.
Now, what's important is, the reason that acting is so important is, look at the nonverbal communication that we're getting. This guy has knowledge. It's proven to be fundamentally transformative of the entire game of baseball, but also not just baseball. It's changed basketball forever. It's also starting to change football. This whole idea of using analytics and Moneyball is so radically different and transformative. And it's a really good tangible example when we look at this whole movie of something concrete, of the same kind of transformative change that every industry is going to go through with this digital to digital or being digitaled. The Oakland A's right now in this movie are in the process of digitaling the rest of the Major League Baseball, what's happening. And this guy sees it, but he's scared shitless to talk about it because people just beat the living daylights out of him about how crazy it is. So that's really what's going on in this scene. I provided links to that. So these are the reason that this stuff is important is because the way that we have to communicate all of this stuff is we have to be able to tap in emotion. We have to be able to make sure that we storyboard it out. We have to make sure that we organize our thoughts correctly so that we can tell that whole story. So going back to our approach, the way that we have to recognize all of these different themes and all of these different little scenes that we just shared, we've got to be able to do the discipline to take inventory of what these items are. So I'm picking up on where we left off yesterday and reacting to some of the things that you guys have shared. I'm going to send the storyboard out of this. We'll talk through some of this, but we need to really challenge ourselves. Well, what are the core messages that we need to get out to, not the deliverables? Yes, deliverables are important. I'm not saying they aren't. The messaging is much, 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 much more important. And that's why Hmong messaging is so critical. And we need to really start challenging ourselves to understand, what do I mean by that? I don't have the vocabulary. Can you guys meet me halfway? So those are the things. Look forward to having a conversation with you guys later. Bye.